So, as I say, there's no right or wrong as regards artistic opinion. There is correctness or incorrectness, but that's another story. What there is, however, is informed artistic opinion. What arts journalists do, or at least what I try to do, is make comparisons, offer a context, provide a background. I still may not be right in my assessment, and as I say, there's no ultimate right or wrong anyway, but the opinion I express, if I do my job properly, is, I hope, going to be markedly more persuasive than it would be otherwise. And far more important, readers will have gained some knowledge that will help make them better informed cultural consumers, and yes, critics than they previously were. In a world where literally millions of readers and viewers and listeners use the web to evaluate works of art and express opinions about them, can any of those opinions be said, for all practical purposes, even to exist? That is, when there's such a multitude of opinions expressed, do any of them register? This is the great challenge of arts journalism in the age of the web. How does it balance the enormous liberation and energy the web has provided us with, as against what is the far more incremental dynamic of culture? There is, in fact, a fascinating and absolutely fundamental paradox at work here. The web, like all technology, is inherently radical. History, the poet William Carlos Williams once wrote, is simply to say that everything is dead. That's how technology regards the past. Culture, in contrast, is inherently conservative. Make no mistake, all art, and I mean all art, is about other art, which is to say previous art. Without the past, there is no culture. Now, I'm an old guy with a vested interest in the status quo, so you can guess which side I come down on. But before I get too superior and gloomy, two qualities which often occur in the same person, let me acknowledge the merits of the uncredentialed, the untrained, the people who stand most to benefit by the web. I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks 4 writers whose work meant a great deal to me when I was young. Well, let's look at them and how they may or may not relate to today's situation. Pauline Kael was a single mother who ran a movie theater in Berkeley and started talking on the radio about movies. Greil Marcus was a grad student in political science, also at Berkeley, who liked rock and roll so much he began writing about it, and fortunately for him, Rolling Stone was right around the corner getting started up. John Leonard dropped out of Harvard and Berkeley and pulled off the neat trick of working at both the most radical media outlet in the country then, Pacifica Radio, and the most conservative, National Review. And James Walcott was an undergraduate at Frostburg State in Maryland who got so pissed off one night at how Norman Mailer was treated on a TV talk show, he wrote Mailer a letter about it. Mailer got him a job at the Village Voice, and Walcott dropped out of school and moved to New York. None of these are especially impressively credentialed people. Imagine how much more each of them could have done, and how much faster had there been a web back then. Technology is always about what. The arts are always about how. And journalism, ultimately, is always about who. 2 who's, in fact. The writer and the reader. What will determine the future of arts journalism is those who practice it and those who read it, which means those of you out there who are young people. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have. I've so intimidated everyone in the audience that you're rendered speechless by my wisdom. Yes, Paul.
Was it Elvis?
That is correct. I have not. I've been to Graceland. I've written about Elvis, but I never had the pleasure of interviewing Elvis. I have, however, interviewed Robert Redford and Henry Kissinger, and of the 2, Robert Redford is still the much handsomer.
James Brown.
I wrote his obituary with great sadness.
Do you think of any bloggers and journalists, art journalists from today that might have the same kind of impact as someone like Greil Marcus might have?
That's a very good question. I cannot, but I'm not the person to ask that question of.
No.
Not just because I'm not just because my natural inclination is to reach for paper rather than to look at the screen, but also because I have this theory that your favorite work of art in any medium will be one that you encounter in the 3rd decade of your life, because that's when you, as a consumer of the arts, kind of an awkward expression, but it's nicely all-encompassing, when you best combine the enthusiasm and openness of youth with the degree of experience and knowledge of an older person, so you can make comparisons and have a better judgment. I am now in the 6th decade of my life, so I've gotten much less elastic and open, and I just don't, since I'm not in a position to be as affected by writers today as I was back then, I really can't say. I'm the wrong person to ask. It's like asking a corpse who's the best funeral director in town. Yes?
Is interest enough to start an arts blog? I mean, where does it fall?
Interest is enough to start it, absolutely. Is interest enough to have readers and maintain it? I would think not. There is no substitute for enthusiasm, and one of the things I love about the web is that it does provide an outlet for the enthusiasm, mostly, but not exclusively, of the young. And certainly, any of you out there who have tried to write for any extended period of time, you realize you can't help but get better. It's like if you start jogging. If you do it every single day, eventually it's going to get easier and easier. You may not end up being an Olympic athlete, but you're going to get better at it. The question is, at what point do you come up against the law of diminishing returns as a writer? And how much do you have to offer readers? Because, again, I'm a print guy, and maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, but I think the ultimate justification for a journalist cannot function as a journalist without an audience. And I don't see how a blog, and I certainly am willing to accept a blogger as a brother or sister journalist, but I don't see how a blogger can continue to succeed unless there are readers out there. And I don't think just enthusiasm or interest is enough. But if there's not enough good prose out there, if somebody's writing good prose, I don't care what format it's in, I want to read it. For all that I'm, increasingly crabbed and inelastic and less open to stuff than I used to be. Yeah.
When you're talking about the more you do something, the better you get.
Yeah.
I'm also wondering, in the context of that blog versus print thing, how much do standards or criteria that you might have had to work consider when you're working as a print journalist coming up? Does that go out the window with the web, the blog situation, where doesn't seem to be of great importance in many contexts?
It certainly doesn't, but that's the kind of question that no one person can settle. I mean, it's the culture. It's all of you multiplied by however many hundreds of thousands will determine it. If people are willing to accept the kind of, and anything I say is going to sound judgmental, but I mean, I got a Pulitzer for being critical. If people are willing to accept the kind of sloppiness that, and as a general term, lack of standards that almost all blogging represents, then that's going to become the standard. And if they're not, then it won't. I suspect they will. And I suspect the degree of high presentation, grammar, punctuation, factuality that we've come to accept in daily print journalism, we're going to see was not at all natural but artificial. I'll be sorry if that's the case, but that's what I expect.